Yep.
I do.
Great, great. So this was Jaedon versus Jerry. Jaedon was black, Jerry was white. And let's take a look. I'm not going to call this a mistake, but generally we like to have some sort of mixture of third and fourth lines. And so if we have everything on the fourth line, it's going to be hard to actually get the territory. So just kind of a good rule of thumb, maybe the stone could have been better placed at R11 so that maybe it works a little bit better with this Q6 stone. If you just constantly have stones on the fourth line, you're just not going to be able to make all this territory. Similarly, if you had the stone at R6 instead of Q6, you wouldn't necessarily play at R11, you'd probably play at Q11. So kind of thinking about it that way too.
Okay.
I've never seen this move before. Whenever black does a diagonal move at P15 here, oops, you almost always see this move follow. And now black has the choice of either playing here or playing here. In this position, I think black playing here would probably make the most sense because it would put pressure on this one weak stone here. So something like this might ensue. And this would kind of be the expected result. And I think this would be quite nice for black. Excuse me, for white. I think this would be a little bit uncomfortable for black, which is also why, I gotta be careful about that, sorry. Which is also why you typically don't see this P15 move, because I think it's generally considered better to press harder on one side than to try to get both. With the idea being that if you were to play here, white plays here, black plays here, you've now put a lot more pressure on this stone and white's territory remains relatively unchanged. So kind of, more reason why you don't necessarily see this P15 move. This move just seems a little bit questionable to me. It's very aggressive. I think that black has now solidified this territory over here. Black's two stones here are quite light and can easily run out. And now white has two weak groups that it needs to worry about. So I think that this move might be a little bit unreasonable. Yeah, I think that this is all going to be a good result for black. Here, I think black probably could have considered pincering. If white plays here, then it's going to get a better sealant on these stones. So either whatever white tries to do here, this could be sente, or this move could be sente. Excuse me. This move can be sente for black later on. So this would be a nice way for black to play. White's going to have to be careful on how aggressive white gets here, because there's that weakness here. And so, yes, of course, white can try to separate, but it's not really clear that this is a good fight for white, because now black is fully connected up and can either play here or play at S18, depending on the situation, and can very easily protect this one stone. And now white has these weak stones, these weak floating stones here. This is probably playable, but I think, you don't really want to make center territory. And I think you have enough strength here where you don't necessarily need to worry about white coming out. So probably why I wouldn't play at 015, and I'd think instead about a pincer. And now I would definitely do some sort of pincer as well. I think you've built up more strength here. Something like this could be quite nice for maybe something like this could be quite nice for black. And you have to remember that black has effectively an eye in the corner, because black can play at S18 whenever it wants, and that's sente to kill this white group. So that's definitely something we need to keep in mind when we're looking at the life of this black group. But after white gets a couple moves here, it's going to become a lot harder for white to be killed, or to get a really severe attack, I guess, is all. And this influence here is not really doing very much. It's facing. There's no stone here. You're not going to make the center territory work. Meanwhile, white's getting side territory. I think if I were in this position, I would have just played here directly, right? If this is your exchange, you can see what white's going to do. If white does something like this, now playing here makes sense. And so if you're going to end up playing at the 3-3 anyway, might as well play here now. This black group is pretty flexible, nothing to really worry about. White can't really play here because that'll put too much pressure on this stone. So I think black would have been much better served just playing elsewhere. Now white blocking at D17 becomes a pretty obvious choice because now it wants to use these stones here. Well, this is fine, no real issues. I think you typically will see this block here. White will try to see what the white will probably play here, black plays here, white plays here. Black has a choice of either playing here or playing here. Something like this could ensue. And it could be excuse me. It could be a fight and for this group in the center. And I think this would be playable for both sides. Otherwise, black and I think can just take a simple variation. Something like this, and this would also be quite good for black as well. I don't think Atariing here, when you have these wood stones here, I don't think giving white a even stronger wall here is going to be particularly useful. And you can't even play this variation because you have these cuts that you need to worry about, and this ladder is good for white. So this would not be a particularly good variation. So it looks like black saw that and black played here instead, but this is also quite nice, quite a thick wall for white, taking away the entire corner for black. And black's position here it's fine, but it's nothing amazing. And I think white's position here would be much better. So for me, I would probably play something like this right now and expand here and reduce the influence that black's getting here. And I think this would be a nice way for white to use the wall, strengthen this group, and also reduce the effectiveness of these stones here. And something that white can consider later on is this cut could be relevant later on as well, especially after this stone is here. Any questions so far, by the way? I know I've been going a little quick, but. Okay. Silence is gold. So these moves are fine. Again, I think my focal point would probably be on the upper side of the board right now. I think it's going to be really hard to get a lot of territory in this area, especially because it's so wide open. There's a 3/3 invasion still available. So I would probably focus more on an L14, just expanding white's territory on the upper side and also protecting these 3 stones. This pincer, this invasion is probably fine. This seemed questionable to me though. I mean, it's kind of obvious that probably black felt a little bit uncomfortable with this variation here. But I think if I were going to do anything here, I'd probably want to play here, have white do this move and maybe get some exchanges on like this. This might be a little bit better of a fight as opposed to playing here directly, which still, if white gets this move, there's still potential connections underneath or potential trouble. And it's not really putting that much pressure on this white stone. I think that white's going to be able to live pretty easily here. And now this stone just looks silly, right? At least if you had played here and you'd done the same variation, at least this stone is actually blocking white from getting out further and might have some sort of relevance for strengthening outside. So I think that K3 was a little bit questionable. It's going to be really hard to attack this group. I don't even know if I would bother. I think I might just sit and play something like this. Use the black strength over here. If white will probably play something like this, and you're just going to have to fight out. But this is going to be a good fight for black, I think. Is maybe questionable, and playing over here maybe is a little bit too small. And again, the idea of this move is it's getting center territory when you really want to be making side or corner territory. It's not going to be hard for white to start attacking this group while also making life. And I don't think this side territory here is necessarily going to be worth, excuse me, the center territory here is necessarily going to be worth that much because you still have a full side over here that you have to surround as well. I think I would just do a 1-space jump here. I don't think this allowing black to cut here is necessarily a good idea because now, white is reducing its own eye space and giving strength to black. So if this was the fight, I would be quite happy as black because white still owes a move over here in order to connect up the group. So white would still have to do something like this. And now black can play moves like this something like this and actually start making up a decent chunk of territory over here as well. Whereas white really got nothing out of the exchange. So I think that there's maybe a little bit of this second knight's move is questionable. I think the first one is playable because you can kind of just give up the stones and maybe sacrifice a little bit to get the corner. So that's one way you can play, or you can, rather than make these exchanges first, you can play here, see what black does. If black plays here, then now you can connect up your stone, you sacrifice this one stone here. So I think the first knight's move made sense because you have a little bit of wiggle room. I don't think the second one made sense. It's probably the best way to phrase it. Here, though, I think that white is a good time to, obviously, if white plays here, this is going to be a good result for black. So we need to try to figure out something else we can do. We need to change the paradigm of the fight. And so that's why in my previous variation, I was suggesting this, right? If black plays here, white can just black off, black will come here, and then white can now connect up its groups. And this will be a good result for white. Even if black plays here, white can cut here, and now this is still a perfectly alive group for white, and this is a good result for white. So careful of how aggressive black gets here. So if white plays at q4, I think this is going to be a good result for white. And so that's kind of setting up for the fight. We know that the direct fight is not advantageous for white, because if we play like this, it's just not going to be a good result for us. So we're setting up for the fight. Any questions on that q4 move? And one question that maybe people might subconsciously think or not necessarily think I haven't figured out yet is, what happens if you play here and then white plays here, or black plays here? Black's trying to block the connection. This is not a small move in the center. This is obviously mapping out a good chunk of territory, but white playing here is going to be quite significant, right? This was the territory that black had mapped out, and now white's attacking the entire corner. So this would be definitely a good result for white in this position. So black doesn't have the opportunity to tanuki.
So if we have to count that corner position, how big of a switch would that be?
How big of a switch?
That's always like, when I need to evaluate how big is the move, Well, and this seems hard to evaluate.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to evaluate. I would say, I don't know if I would be able to give a real good, accurate number calculation.
Okay.
I think that black's territory, the territory that black's going to get here, is not going to be much, and that's because white has this stone on the outside that's going to be really hard to attack. So even though black is making this position stronger, I don't think black's ever really going to be able to get too much from it. So maybe black gets an extra 10 to 15 points here, maybe, right? Whereas, this was a 10 to 15 point corner for black, right? But if we do this switch, if we do this exchange, this is now a 15 point corner for white. So I would say this is probably a 30 point move. And maybe if we said that black gets 10 or 15 on the outside, that means that white gets 10 or 15 on the inside. It gets an additional 15 points or so. That's, again, I'm broad stroking it, but
yeah, but that's a good way to explain. This is just in the middle, not that big, and this is 30-point move. So
yeah. And here it seems like you're trying to set up for the fight, but I think that black can just very easily play here, and you're just never going to be able to get a good result. Like now, if white plays here, you've already lost your potential connection. So the timing of this move is questionable, and I think if black just plays here, it's a terrible fight for white. This move was just a mistake. It's dame. If we play here, white plays here, black plays here, there's no cut, right? This is no issue. Maybe white gets a little bit more on the outside, but this is too good for black. So I think it was just a lapse in judgment here. And it looks like white was trying to set up some sort of fight here in kind of the way that's just you start with 06 as opposed to q4. I think the difference though between 06 versus q4 is that q4 is just a larger move, right? If you just come in and block like this, and you can concede some points on the outside to white, that's fine. Capturing these stones is going to be well worth it, right? Here, this is maybe a little questionable because white can play here, and set up for some sort of fight here. I'm not sure if this is necessarily the fight that I would want to do. So I think that I would do a more harsh cut here. Now, if white does something like this, you just play like this. And this is obviously going to be a good result for black. Whatever white gets on the outside is just not going to be worth enough to get whatever this black corner is going to be. But even still, I think this ended up being a pretty good result for black. Black gets to get the center, keeping pressure on these stones. But I think better to give white the center and definitively kill the stones than have them do sort of a race. And it's actually going to be kind of hard to kill these stones because this move is sente for white. And black is going to have to do some sort of protecting move, whether it's here or here, something here in order to protect. And white's not going to have any risk of dying here. White can play in the simplest way and guarantee life. So because of that, I'm not a big fan of this variation for black. I would say if black had maybe an extra move here or something like that, it's a much stronger position, then I would say this would be an okay way to play for black. But because this corner is so open, I think it's still a little too dangerous. And I think that white playing here is also a little unreasonable. White's very weak here, kind of weak here. I think if black just plays a move like maybe something like this, I think that it's going to be kind of hard for white to live here. And certainly if it's something like this happens, it's not going to be a good fight because white has to worry about all these stones here, has to worry about these stones here, whereas black stones are much stronger. So I think this is a little bit too aggressive. This is fine too, but I think that there's still this weakness here that you want to kind of protect. And I'm not sure how well this move does that protection, right? Like it doesn't really stop white from getting eye space here. So I'd be more focused on stopping white from getting eye space here as opposed to stopping white from coming down here because there's no eye space to be had here. And also you have to think that, don't forget, this move is sente for black. Right? If white were to play something else, black plays here and will kill this group. So when you're thinking about this fight here and you're thinking, okay, if white gets this move, well, I can play this move for free and take away some of the eye space here. That's something you really have to be conscious of. So let's keep going. Yeah, so now white's making use of this weakness here. It's gonna be tough for black to really kill it. I think that this move might be a little questionable. Really, realistically, white just needs to worry about living. So I would just play here and just a very simple variation. Just guarantee life. You don't want to get fancy when you're in danger of dying, especially when you have these weak stones on the outside too. And I'm not sure how effective this is going to end up being. Definitely just extend here. The less cutting points you have, the better. When you play here, you're actually creating 1, 2, 3 cutting points. Whereas if you were to just play here, one cutting point here and 1 cutting point here. So you've actually created an extra cutting point by playing at O12. Definitely when you're in this fight, you definitely got to think, okay, well, I can play here for sente, right? And if white says, okay, well, I'm going to play here, then you just say, sure, I'll kill this group. So, you can let white live somewhat and still have a really good result here. So definitely something to keep in mind in this fight, because I think at any point if black had played S10, this result in the upper right corner is going to be too good for black. And then now that this group is super strong because it's killed these white stones here, let's say something like this happens. Just something random. Now black can get a really severe attack on these 3 stones because black doesn't need to worry about the weakness that was here. So I think that maybe white wasn't necessarily, but I think both sides weren't necessarily paying attention to how weak this group was in the upper right corner. And because of that, I think that part of the reason why I think that white's fight here was so questionable, because how weak it is up here as well and how weak it is here. Probably better to play here. If white plays here, again, you have this move here. White is going to have a tough time playing a ko because white still has to worry about this group in the corner. And so I'm not really sure what ko threats white would have. maybe I'm not, maybe white plays here and then black just takes. But I'm not sure how good of a co-threat this is, right? This seems a little bit risky. Maybe something like this would happen. But I don't think this is going to be a particularly good fight for white. So I think if black had just played here instead, this would be almost game over. Definitely, I definitely don't want to understate the value of a move like this, because what this does is it actually allows white to create black to create a co here later on, right? Black now has the option of playing this co. And the other thing that it does is it completely destroys any OI space that white was going to have, and it also completely protects this group here. And so we were already talking about how this group is struggling to live to begin with. The fact that you can now potentially kill a couple extra stones, and white still is going to need to add an extra move here to really live, and then you can come back and play here. I think that just getting the territory is enough for black at this point. I don't think you need to get fancy. I do want to be mindful of time because we're at 6:20, so maybe it's time to switch to the next game.